Welcome back to the free and open course on real customer service. There are many customer service channels out there and each customer has their preferences. So today we will discuss the two branches per se that there are: asynchronous and synchronous communications. This subject is very dense and I will do my best to cover the key points of each one. Hit thumbs up if you want more content related to customer services. Make sure you have subscribed to the channel too. Hello there everyone! There is a Microsoft survey conducted with 5,000 people of various nationalities, which points out that 98% of them believe that customer service is important when forming a judgment about a brand, but that 62% have switched companies because of poor service. These numbers are from the US. 64% of people say that they feel that the process has worsened or remained the same when it comes to getting the information they need from the customer service team. Therefore, we will discuss here about how to improve your customer service channels, focusing on two main aspects: synchronous and asynchronous communication. If you want me to enter specific tools, the difference between the channels, or how to deal with each medium in general, leave the suggestions in the comments. What is synchronous and asynchronous communication? Synchronous communication is all that happens in real time when you are interacting with the other side at the same time. And this is necessary, for example, in the service at the counter, via phone calls or chat on your website. It's what most people expect, at least. Asynchronous communication occurs when people in the conversation do not need to be responding at the same time, such as email, messaging apps, and contact forms. Here's what happens. The difference between the two is a customer's expectation in relation to the type of interaction and the shape it takes. For example, in asynchronous communication, you expect more complete, elaborate responses that can be resolved with as few interaction as possible. In synchronous communication, however, that back and forth of messages is expected, maybe even with a more informal tone in the interaction. Often, the customer understands that it will not be possible to resolve what you want on the call, but they don't expect you to call again later to ask more questions. There will be always that feeling, you could have asked me that before. Here we're getting more into the topic of building relationship in our service framework. In the US, in the same Microsoft report, the three preferred ways for Americans are phone, live chat, and email. It's also worth mentioning that this study is done by Microsoft, so it probably has a bias of having been conducted with a more technologically literate audience. Another survey from Aircall interviewed 750 online shoppers who recently sought customer service related to an online purchase. 67% say they prefer brands that create self-help resources for their customers, like FAQs and tutorials. For general issues, phone, live chats, and email were their preferences. The difference showed up when it was about an urgent matter. While phone was preferred as a first choice by 31% of people, in urgent situations it raised to 70%. It's worth saying that preferences for customer service channels will change depending on the type of servicing you're providing. Is it purchasing a book, scheduling an appointment with a doctor? Is it a $59 course available for purchase? Is it your pizza that should have arrived 30 minutes ago? You can use these preferences in these reports when prioritizing your customer service channels, especially if you own an e-commerce, food delivery, B2B software, or other popular area. Since these areas tend to have extensive research and service for you to use as references. Or you can conduct your own survey with your customers if you have the time to have a more accurate picture of your specific customer base if you don't feel represented by these studies. With how to deal with customer in a synchronous service. The first step is to prioritize in order to make your work more efficient. Have a routine of organizing what's urgent and important. The more urgent, the quicker the response has to be. The more important, the greater the impact of that on your company. You can use the care and attention framework as reference. When answering, giving complete answers in short sentences. Complete answers in the sense of even addressing what wasn't asked and what you think they may ask next. For example, you receive an email asking how to issue an invoice in the software you provide. You give all the instructions, right? Then you can complement. If you want to check the issued invoices or even cancel one, go to the corner of the software, click on the List Invoices button. To cancel, there will be an X icon next to each invoice to be canceled. Remember that you can only cancel an invoice during the month it was issued. Be thorough in your response. Did it make sense? Give the possible scenarios. Since these more complete responses do take longer and may not even be useful, many companies expect the customers to ask first. This is where canned responses would do an excellent job. Also, take advantage of the medium and use formatting to make the messages easier to read. Use links, indentation, bulleted lists, etc. It all helps. In the end, proofread it to check if there are no mistakes, no typos. Since I know I'm not the most detail-oriented person, I do proofread all my texts 3 times and still mistakes occur. One thing that we have to be aware of is, as many of these asynchronous communication channels have no voice and inflection, it is difficult to notice the feeling or the sentences get confusing. Choose to write shorter sentences as if they were steps. This is one of the differences that most cause problems, lack of emotions in asynchronous tools. In longer conversations, like those that drag on for days or weeks, or even months for more complex issues, don't count on memory. In a conversation that takes weeks, recall the previous taken steps. You can get to the point of saying, just reviewing what we've done so far. X and Y happened to you in January, so I reported the issue to our engineering team, who noticed it was a bug in the system. Thanks for reporting that. We managed to fix it in 10 days, or we put it for download on the 10th of February. At least, as I have a bad memory, I always remember the steps that were taken when the communication goes beyond 14 days. It's not an exact time, but an estimate. In this specific case, the conversation apparently took a month. I would say to not be 2 weeks without contact, unless there is a clear deadline. You may still report to the person halfway through that you are still working on the case. This all helps to give the feeling of a service provided. The first thing about synchronous communication that is important to talk about is that you need to know yourself as a person. Know your mannerisms, how you react, your expressions. It is very easy for people to slip into these habits regardless of the channel, but it happens even more in face-to-face interactions. People can see and understand your expressions. It is very important that as the person speaks, you show that you are paying attention to them, nodding your head, giving verbal signals such as, yeah, got it, right, so they know that you are following along. Always focus on the subject at hand. Understand what is on the agenda. If necessary, write it down so that you can address each one. When a person is talking, it may be that they bring up more than one subject. So you want to keep track of all points. Then you can repeat the points raised, confirm that everything is fine, and go on addressing one by one. I can't avoid but to comment here on a skill essential in service: active listening. Listening to what the customer is saying with the intention of understanding and trying to help. Ask questions. Customers like to talk, and it's our role to give them the feeling that we are listening. Note that to give the feeling does not mean pretending. What happens is that it has little effect if you are actually listening, but the person thinks you don't care. This is a very common mistake. Convey that you are listening. In the end, repeat what was decided, confirm that you are right on your assumptions, and agree on the next steps. Note that you may not have to negotiate the next steps, but make sure that the person is on the boat with you about what to do next. Of course, formalize whenever you can. You may be using customer service channels that don't keep records, So send them an email, for example. Record this in some way, as we may be subject to memory, or even the customer may have different recollections about what happened. If you have a copy of what actually happened, it helps a lot. And it's not that customers have bad intentions most of the time, but it's that they are also subject to memory. And I don't like to rely on mine. The key point is not following mindlessly the guidelines of what these surveys say, what good service is, but rather that you provide to your customers a good experience with your company, regardless of which customer service channels you and they choose. They have to have the feeling that a good service is being provided, and that happens when you give them care and attention. There are many tools and courses out there for you and your team to use and to improve your skills. The important thing is to be clear about what your service adds to your customer life and experience with your brand, and how you can contribute to it through your service. In my experience, your client doesn't care so much about the medium, but about the final message and the way it's delivered. I go even further and say that the way we interact with your customers is just as important, and in some cases even more so than what we say to them. Cool? Better than that, just twice that. To recap what we saw in this lesson, we talk about the difference between asynchronous and synchronous communication and tips about each one, what the client expects, and good practice. It was also mentioned preferences for channels by Americans regarding customer service. I took 2 different surveys to cover more on the subject, which is complex. In the next lesson, we will learn about how to craft the perfect message and a script that works for most situations, always with care and attention in mind. Make sure you are subscribed to my channel to follow the lessons, like this content if you think it can help you, and share it with your colleagues and coworkers. Always look both ways. See you in the future.